All right, so good evening. Good Saturday evening, and welcome back to JPC, Watchdog Ministries. This is Watchdog News. So this evening, is my geopolitical and economic report. So please like, share, subscribe, and follow. And then we're going to get into tonight's news. So, a turning point in global affairs. As the world enters 2025, geopolitical tensions, economic uncertainties, and shifting alliances define our global landscape. The Russia-Ukraine war, China-Taiwan conflict, and Israel-Gaza crisis continue to shape foreign policies, while NATO and the EU navigate increased defense commitments. At the same time, global economic growth is slowing, and the health diplomacy faces turbulence. President Donald Trump's decision to withdraw from the WHO, and then he hints at a possible rejoining, raises questions about the future of global health governance. Amid these developments, the Trump factor looms large, as his potential return to power could reshape NATO, trade relations, military alliances, and diplomacy efforts worldwide. The world is at crossroads right now. With diplomacy, so the world right now is at a crossroads, which you all agree, right? Will diplomacy prevail, or are we heading towards more global instability? Right? Ukraine's military strategy, strengthening the offensive, right? So Ukraine has launched long-range drone strikes deep into Russia, targeting military and logistic hubs. These strikes have served two purposes. One, disrupting Russia's supply chains to weaken its war effort. Two, keep global attention on Ukraine, struggle preventing Western fatigue, right? However, despite Ukraine's bold tactics, its war effort heavily depends on Western military aid. Ukraine President Zelensky admitted that 40% of Ukraine's weaponry comes from U.S. and NATO supplies. And delays in U.S. funding pose a severe challenge. Right? NATO's expanding role. Let's talk about this for a second. So NATO's expanding role. Is 5% GDP military spending the future? With Trump demanding NATO allies to increase defense spending to 5% of GDP, European leaders are at a crossroads. Poland has embraced the idea, spending 4.7% of its GDP on defense, the highest in NATO. Germany and France remain hesitant, warning that higher military spending could hurt their economies and lead to political backlash. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte has pushed for greater EU-NATO cooperation, arguing that Europe must take more responsibility for its defense. What's the dilemma? Should NATO double down on military backing for Ukraine or shift toward peace negotiations? I'm going to say that again. It's a question I'm proposing. Should NATO double down on military backing for Ukraine or shift towards peace negotiations? You guys let me know in the comments. What about Trump's influence? Will he cut aid or push for a quick peace deal? Let's explore it, right? Trump, right, has previously vowed to end the war within 24 hours. That was before he was reelected, right? Though the details of his strategy still remained unclear. Even then, even when I was researching it, it still remained clear. What do critics warn? So critics warn that Trump's peace deal might pressure Ukraine into territorial concessions. Yeah, could, right? Potentially recognizing Russian control over parts of Ukraine. That is from the Kiev Independent. Right now, as I sit here, Russia controls about 20% of Ukraine. Let that sink in. 20% is what they control. Zelensky has insisted that any peace deal must include Ukraine in the negotiations, warning that an in-post settlement could undermine Ukraine's sovereignty. What if Trump reduces military aid? NATO might have to what? Set up its support, training European economies further. So what's next for Ukraine? If Ukraine secures more NATO weaponry, the war could continue indefinitely with no clear victor. I think so. It's going to be a stalemate. If Trump limits U.S. aid, Russia could gain a military advantage. Right? Or like I said last night, Russia could take Kiev sometime mid-2025, right? So if Trump limits U.S. aid, Russia could gain a military advantage, forcing Ukraine into peace talks on unfavorable terms. If Europe fractures over military spending, Russia could exploit the divide to expand its offensive. I think so. Now let's talk about China and Taiwan tensions. A slow march towards confrontation. Yes, it is. Chinese military escalation and new provocations. China has intensified military operations near Taiwan, deploying Coast Guard and naval vessels while increasing airspace incursions. What was Taiwan's response? They scrambled fighter jets and naval patrols to monitor Chinese movements, strengthening air defense systems to prevent a surprise attack. The concern, right? A single miscalculation could trigger a direct military clash. U.S. response. The Trump factor again. So what's the Trump factor? Trump has signaled strong U.S. military support for Taiwan, but his unpredictability concerns allies, right? Some analysts believe Trump could use Taiwan as a leverage in trade negotiations with China, potentially softening military commitments if Beijing agrees to economic deals. What's next for Taiwan? If China intensifies pressure, Taiwan may escalate its defenses, risking a direct war, another conflict. However, if Trump shifts U.S. policy, Taiwan's security could become a bargaining chip in U.S.-China relations. Let's talk about Israel-Hamas conflict. It's a fragile ceasefire, but for how long, right? Recent developments, prisoner exchange, and uncertain peace. Hamas has released 4. Let's say that again. Hamas has released 4 Israeli soldiers in exchange for 200 Palestinian prisoners, marking a temporary reduction in hostilities. 4 for 200. 4 for 200. Wow. That's a good deal. However, Israel has refused to allow displaced Palestinians to return until all hostages are freed, prolonging tensions. Trump's stance, unwavering support for Israel. Trump's approval of significant U.S. arms shipments to Israel signals a commitment to Israeli military dominance. However, this move also risks escalating tensions with Iran and Hezbollah, potentially sparking a broader Middle Eastern conflict. I think so. Let's dig a little deeper. If Israel resumes military operations, the war could spread beyond Gaza. If Hamas retains power, long-term peace remains unlikely. Now let's move on to our global economic outlook. Stagnation or resilience? Slow growth ahead? What do some of you think? So the IMF predicts GDP growth will remain at 3.2%, continuing last year's low growth levels, the IMF report. Advanced economies, slight growth increase to 1.7%. Emerging markets slowing from 4.3% to 4.2%, mainly due to China's economic struggles, according to the World Bank. The NATO economy conflict. With defense budgets rising across Europe, many nations face a trade-off between military spending and economic stability. Higher defense spending, potential cuts to social programs, and economic investments. Less defense investment, increased vulnerability to Russian and Chinese aggression. Now let's move on to global health. Let's talk about the WHO and Trump's U-turn. So the background, right? It says Trump says he may consider rejoining the World Health Organization. Whoa, let's look at this for a second, right? So Trump's withdrawal from the WHO, then a possible reentry. Let's talk about this, right? Trump signed an executive order to withdraw the U.S. from the WHO, citing concerns over financial contributions and management issues. However, he later suggested that the U.S. might rejoin if the WHO implements reforms, particularly by increasing China's financial contributions. What's the fallout? What happens if the U.S. fully withdraws? The WHO could lose 18% of its budget, affecting global health programs. Wow. That's interesting stat. That's interesting. Fine. The Global Fund for AIDS, Malaria, and Tuberculosis is now turning to private donations, seeking $2 billion to offset funding losses. Wow. What's the concern? Will global health governance become more prioritized and fragmented? What's the conclusion? My conclusion is a world at crossroads, right? As 2025 unfolds, geopolitical instability, military conflicts, and economic uncertainty shape the global order. NATO faces financial pressures as military spending increases. Russia-Ukraine remains unresolved, and Trump policy choices could shift the war direction. China-Taiwan remains tense, with the risk of miscalculation and military confrontations. The Middle East remains volatile, with no apparent long-term peace plan in sight. The global health faces uncertainty as the U.S.-WHO relationship remains in the flux. It's true. Finally, before I close out, the world must decide. Will leaders choose diplomacy, or are we heading towards an era of expanded global conflict? Because I see a lot of people expanding, even us here in the U.S. The world seems to be expanding. Russia is expanding itself. They invaded Ukraine. China is expanding itself, going after Taiwan. Even Trump has talked about Greenland, right, for the U.S. expanding. Think about it. There's a lot of expansion going on. So close out with that again. The world must decide. Will leaders choose diplomacy, or are we heading towards an era of expanded global conflict? You guys be the judge. You let me know. Right? I love these reports. I love researching all this, putting together reports for all of you. Right? It's been an honor. And thank you all again for listening. This is JPC, Watchdog Ministries. It's Watchdog News. I'm Jared Wesley Campbell. I'm signing off. Please like, share, subscribe, and follow us. Right? It means a lot. No matter what you do, you're participating in this channel. If you just view it, you're participating. You like, you're participating. You subscribe, follow, join, you're participating. If you comment, you're participating. If you like, you're participating. If you share, you're participating. I love you all so much. Thank you all so much. I love you all so much. Have a very blessed evening. Jared Wesley Campbell. I'm out, guys.